Thank you for joining us as you prepare for your AF5 exam. Brand Financial Training have been around since 2007, helping exam candidates like yourself to pass their CII exams with our exam resources and support written by highly experienced authors who also have experience marking CII exams. We've been providing a comprehensive analysis document for well over 10 years now, so we've got a lot of experience in interpreting the fact find for AF5 and predicting the questions that are most likely to be asked in the exam. Fact find analysis documents are seen as an essential part of the revision process and can really help maximise your chances of passing. We've seen the exam evolve a lot over the last 10 or so years, and so we are in the best position to help you to prepare to pass. The entire team here at Brand Financial Training genuinely cares about you and your exam journey. We want to know how you're doing and how we can help, with our aim being to make your exam journey with us enjoyable as well as successful. We know from feedback that one area students really struggle with above all else is in the interpretation of the questions. As a result of this, we've included a section in our analysis that focuses on helping students answer the question that's actually asked of them, which may be worded slightly differently from the one they've prepared for. We've seen that even where the question's been worded differently, it's the same content that makes up the answer, as it's still testing the same knowledge. So being prepared for a change of style in questioning really helps candidates not to panic when they read the actual question in the exam. They know they're prepared and can adapt their thinking to the question actually in front of them. Exam technique is another crucial area, especially for AF5, where we have to be focused on the fact find, but we also need to spend time on how we answer the questions. But we'll talk about that a bit later on. So the objectives of this session are to look at the structure of the exam to make sure we all know what to expect, to look at what a revision strategy might look like for the weeks leading up to when the fact find is released. We'll then spend some time looking at a selection of the typical exam questions you might face, and then we'll think about what we do once the fact find is released. And finally, we'll offer some tips on exam technique. Okay, so first, the structure of the exam. As I'm sure you're aware, the AF5 exam is 3 hours long and all 8 questions are based on one fact find that you'll have access to approximately 2 weeks before the exam date. The nominal pass mark for AF5 is 55%, and with 160 marks available in total, this means you'll need at least 88 marks to pass. The exam will test your knowledge on the application of the financial planning process, but without a study text to use for revision, you'll be expected to apply your knowledge from your studies of RO1 through to RO6, as well as content from AF1 through AF4. The CII recommends that 3 units are taken at the advanced level before progressing to AF5, as advanced technical knowledge of taxation, trusts, pensions and investments is usually needed. This suggests, therefore, sitting AF1 and AF4 and probably one of the pensions modules before you sit AF5. As we've been helping candidates with AF5 by producing an analysis for every exam sitting for over 10 years, we have very strong experience of what's likely to come up in your exam. We suggest analysing every page using highlighter pens and making notes as you go along, as there is a lot of information in that document. The fact find will be around 11 pages long and include all the details you'd expect. So as an example, part 1 gives you client basic details. So things such as names, ages, health status, along with whether they're smokers or have any interesting or dangerous hobbies. You might be given a key piece of information such as a planned date for retirement. Other information such as number of grandchildren might also be given. These are just examples, but part 2 gives you family details such as children. In part 3, we're given employment details such as salaries, pension schemes, protection cover, employment status, and there might also be additional notes containing specifics in here. Part 4 details the client's other professional advisors, so things like their accountant or solicitor. And in part 5, we're told their income and expenditure, which might include details such as income tax details. There'll almost certainly be detailed notes, which is important to analyse as it gives us clues as to the types of questions that might be asked. Part 6 to 10 give information regarding assets, liabilities, policies they might already have, and any savings. And part 11 is where details of clients' pensions are given, including type of scheme, pension benefits, death benefits, AVCs, and so on. Finally, part 12 is about inheritances. So this is where we find out if they have a will, and if so, what type, and any information about trusts and gifts. Now, any specifics given must be carefully analysed. Ask yourself how the information given might be relevant when considering what might be tested. By the time we've finished analysing each page, the document can become rather dog-eared and also quite colourful with the use of different highlighter pens, but it's crucial that no stone is left unturned. So what does a revision strategy look like if we haven't had the fact find yet? Well, don't be misled into believing that there's no work to do until the fact find is released. There are areas of general revision where you can prepare beforehand so that you can then focus on the fact find as soon as it's released. The first thing to be clear about is the learning outcomes detailed in the syllabus. This gives you an overview of the exam, and so it's a good place to start to have a think about how the information within them might be tested. There are 11 learning outcomes for AF5, all relating to constructing a financial plan that demonstrates all of the following on screen now. Each of the 8 questions you'll face will be testing one of these aspects. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but plenty of preparation can be done. For example, learning outcome 1 covers the relationship between advisor and client, and the second one is on remuneration strategies. Questions on these areas don't come up in every single exam, but they do every now and again. So we include this each time to ensure it's covered just in case. Learning outcome 6 is regarding risk, and again, there's plenty of work that can be done on this, so making sure you know what types of questions might come up around risk profiling, as well as some of the limitations around using risk profile tools. This is all generic information that could come up in any exam, so again, we include it in each sitting. The final learning outcome concerns the review process. Now, this type of question can be easily practiced to ensure the generic marks are revised, and once the fact find is received, making a few of the bullet points specific to the client's circumstances. As we mentioned earlier, the way exam questions are asked can often trip candidates up. Sometimes the wording can seem complicated or may not have been worded in the same way as the questions and answers that had been prepared in the lead up to the exam. And this is why it's important that you truly understand the exam content so that you are able to apply your knowledge in whatever context is required within the exam. Within the exam, there are some very standard questions that always get asked. These include the fact-finding question, which is a standard question that would ask you to identify the additional information you'd need to advise the clients on one of their stated aims, and we'll have a look at one of these in more detail shortly. Analysis questions are also very common, so this could be a question asking you to identify any gaps in a client's financial planning, or it could be that you'd need to explain why their current fund choices or a product they already have might or might not be suitable for them. Factors questions are increasingly common. With one of these, you would be expected to identify the key factors an advisor would need to consider to ensure a particular need's met, such as protection or investment needs. Recommend and justify questions. These will also generally appear in each sitting. So this is recommending a particular product, for example, and then justifying why. A review question appears in most, if not all, exams, and again, it could be that you'd need to identify the factors to consider when reviewing one aspect of their financial planning, such as inheritance tax or pensions. And finally, there will also be client-specific questions on technical subjects that, in the main, will be signposted clearly in the fact find. So let's have a look at some examples. In each exam, as we said, there is a fact-finding question. It could be on any of the client aims, so it's important to prepare in advance what these aims might be and the questions you'd need to ask the clients to have the information necessary to advise them. So, for example, you may be asked to identify the additional information required to enable you to establish if Dean and Christie's current savings, pensions and investments are suitable to meet their needs now they are retired. The question will tell you how many marks can be gained. This could be part of an immediate objective that was given on the day, such as to review the tax efficiency and suitability of their current pensions and investments. In our analysis, we provide a fact-finding question and model answer for each of the financial objectives that we've predicted, as of course we don't know which one will be tested or indeed whether the CII will ask about one or more. Here's a potential model answer for our example question based on a fact find. Now, there's a lot on the screen here as this example is a 13-mark question, but the point here is that if you pause and read them through, you'll find that some of these points will appear in any fact-finding question on savings and investments. For example, capacity for loss, costs and charges, performance, willingness to change ownership of assets. These apply to any investment fact-finding question. So much of what you can revise is generic rather than specific to the fact find. However, there will be other answers that are specific to the fact find that will gain you more marks. In this example, you can see reference to Christie's pensions and their grandchildren, assuming, of course, that these are in the fact find. Recommend and justify questions are also common. When answering this type of question, do not forget to do both the recommendation and the justification. So as an example, this question's asking candidates to recommend and justify the actions that the client can take to improve the tax efficiency of their current savings and investments. So depending on the circumstances of the clients given in the fact find, a potential answer might be something like transfer the OIC or investment trust into joint names or into Christie's name, with the justification being that this would be treated as a no gain, no loss disposal or would be an exempt transfer due to them being married. Half the marks are usually awarded for the recommendation and the other half for the justification. In each exam, there is also usually one or sometimes more factors questions. You need to be prepared for these in your exam, so practice, and more practice is the tip here. Here's an example question worth 9 marks in total. You're being asked to identify the key factors that an advisor should consider before recommending the sale of Richard's Investment Trust. So let's look at the model answer for this one. So you would pull out from the fact find the factors to take into account. Here's an example of what could be pulled from a fact find, although there are of course many other potential answers depending upon the fact find. Here we covered the tax position and some technical detail about an investment trust. You might find that some technical information is given in the fact find, for example, the fact that the investment trust was trading at a premium in bullet point 5 here. You can also state facts such as the final 3 examples here. Does it match the attitude to risk, and does it provide extra income and diversification? Make sure you're comfortable with what a factor is. As mentioned, they do tend to come up in each exam. Sometimes they might use the term issues instead of factors, but the same content would really make up your answer. The key is just to practice them. The review question usually appears at the end of the exam and it will relate to one of the objectives, but it could be on any of them. It can be a single question or it could have a number of parts. You can see an example of part A and B on screen now. So let's look at an example model answer for identifying 6 events that would trigger an immediate review of the client's financial arrangements, which is part A of our sample question. So there are usually generic points to be made that could apply in any review question from any exam. Things like market conditions and changes in tax and legislation. Personal circumstances will always be relevant, but they'll need to be tailored a bit more to the clients. Other points would need to be specific to the client's circumstance. In this example, there are some points relating to the age of the clients in relation to long-term care and the pension review at age 75. But really, the review question should be easy marks to get. We know it's pretty much guaranteed to appear, and we know that 3 of these are usually generic and the other half related to the clients in the fact find. So with a lot of marks available in full for this question, that is a fair chunk in the bag if the right prep has been done. So once you've got a handle on the types of questions you'll be faced with, it's now time to practice. And it is crucial to do this. You need to know that you can complete the exam in 3 hours. So lock yourself in a room, set the timer for 3 hours, and complete a mock paper. These can be found on the AF5 page of the CII website called Exam Guides, and these have been written by the senior examiner. Once you've finished, you can compare your answers with the model answer that's also with the exam guide, and this will give you a really good idea as to whether you interpreted the question properly and that your answer was detailed enough for the marks on offer. But make sure you notice where you could have done better. Make sure you related as much as possible your answers to the information in the fact find. What this may also highlight is any areas of weakness. You'll soon be able to see where these are. This is the time to plug any gaps you feel you have in your knowledge as well as in exam technique. Once the fact find's landed, then you'll need to concentrate on that and what it presents in terms of technical and product knowledge. So take the time now to fill any gaps in your knowledge and get your exam technique perfected. The fact find is usually released by the CII on a Friday. The exam will then be just over 2 weeks from then. That 2-week clock will then start to tick quite loudly. Starting your preparation on the day that the fact find is released does usually give you the advantage of another weekend as well. But essentially, we've got 2 weeks to really get to know the clients, try and bring them to life in your mind. The more realistic that you can make them, the easier you'll find recalling knowledge in the exam. The fact find will not include the financial objectives of the client, so we need to consider these as we analyse the information in the fact find, as well as think of any other possible areas that could be tested. Now's the time to make 100% sure that your technical knowledge is up to speed. Make a list of the subjects in the fact find and think about how strong your knowledge is in each area. So for example, if we're told a client has a child with a disability, now's the time to make sure you know the ins and outs of trusts for vulnerable beneficiaries. There may be the odd curveball in the exam, but the majority of questions can be predicted from the fact find. Calculations rarely, if ever, appear in the AF5 exam. However, it is important that you understand the taxes that will affect them and whether they will be basic, higher or additional rate taxpayers. If it looks like a client might have an inheritance tax problem, make sure you know roughly what that is. After the CII releases the fact find, here at Brand Financial Training, we get started on our in-depth analysis of it. This has helped thousands of candidates over the years to pass AF5. It's written by a highly qualified and experienced technical team, and it's released to our customers 5 calendar days after the CII releases the fact find, but earlier if possible. The analysis package also includes an essential email support day. Within 48 hours after the support day is concluded, we also send analysis customers a Q&A document that shares the answers to all the useful questions posed by their peers on email support day. With over 10 years experience writing AF5 analyses for thousands of exam candidates, here at Brand Financial Training, we have a long and proven track record of helping people pass the exam. It's not an easy exam, so getting all the help you can get is advisable. Our analysis document for each sitting includes everything you see here. The first thing we do is make a note of the key facts from the fact find and our initial thoughts. So here we're picking out key facts such as age, health status, types of planning they have in place already. For example, if they're older clients, perhaps their health condition might prompt a question on long-term care or putting a power of attorney in place. We'll then carefully consider what the financial aims might be and provide our expected questions and model answers. These are based on our knowledge and expertise of over 10 years of AF5 papers. We will include each of the question styles we mentioned earlier, along with technical areas we feel might be tested as well. All our analysis is provided in bullet point format, so it's easy to read and to revise from, and some information will be contained in tables where we feel this is more helpful for clarity and revision. We have a whole section on exam technique which reminds you, for example, to use bullet points, to state the obvious, and to help with the use of abbreviations. We've also provided a section on past papers, which shows the types of questions that have been asked in previous exam sittings. For example, how many times a fact-finding question was asked, as well as the other types of questions that feature regularly. We also provide a full breakdown of what exactly was tested in previous exam papers, so this includes the subject areas. We have a generic questions section, which includes different product areas and technical knowledge that we feel might be relevant to that particular sitting. We include this because whilst the majority of the marks available should be directly related to the client's stated aims, you are likely to face some questions that might, for example, test your understanding of parts of the financial planning process and other technical areas such as risk profiling. So the generic section is designed to cover these. And finally, we provide a section of self-test questions related to the fact find. This provides valuable practice and a reminder that a question in the actual exam paper may be worded differently, but the model answer can be just as relevant and valid. We also provide a very highly regarded email support day. This comes as part of our fact find analysis and is scheduled for a few days before the exam. So from 9 until 5 on the email support day, our very experienced technical team will be available to answer any questions that you might have based on the fact find and our analysis. For example, helping someone with a technical question on a type of trust or pension. Any questions emailed to us up to 5 o'clock on the email support day will be answered that day, but do bear in mind if you email us just before 5 or if it's been an exceptionally busy day, you might receive your response later that evening, and then within 48 hours we will email to you the useful questions with our answers that were asked of us during the email support day, so you'll benefit from the questions of others. I'll also point out that if you pre-order our analysis before it's released, which is usually 5 days after the CII releases the case studies, but it is sometimes sooner, there is a special pre-order price and full details can be found on our website. So you've done all your preparation and the day's finally arrived and your exam's in a few hours. It's probably true to say for most of us that doing any kind of last minute cramming only adds to the exam nerves already being experienced. What you can do though is remember this. Structure your answer using bullet points. It really is perfectly acceptable to the examiner and they would much rather be marking bullet points than trying to pick out key points from pages and pages of sentences. Don't use too much jargon, but also don't worry too much about abbreviating really common terms. Things like IHT, CGT can very obviously be used, but even CLT and PETs will be acceptable to examiners. The CII actually provides a glossary of abbreviations at the back of their exam guide that you can use in financial planning online exams, so do make sure to have a look at them. Remember to state the obvious, things like stating they're in good health for protection type questions, or that one's a basic rate taxpayer and one's a higher rate taxpayer. Sometimes it's the obvious information that we forget to write down. Use the number of marks available as an indicator of how many points you should be making. So an 8-mark question needs 8 different points to gain the marks. If you can think of more, write them down. This might mean 8 separate bullet points, or sometimes 2 marks might be within one sentence. But do remember, if a question's for 3 marks, a full page answer will be a waste of your valuable time in the exam. And if a question's for 12 marks, you'll need to provide more than a couple of bullet points. Probably goes without saying, but it's surprising how some candidates don't pay attention to the marks on offer. Finally, remember there's no negative marking with any CII written exam. What this means is that marks are not taken away for incorrect information. What you must be careful of though is hedging. So that's where candidates give more than one answer, which might even be contradictory, in the hope that one of them's right. In these circumstances, the examiner is unlikely to give you the mark, even though one of those answers might have been right. They do need to be confident that you do actually know what the answer is. At the end of the day, the key to success in the AF5 exam, and in any exam really, is preparation. You need to be confident that by the time you reach the day of your exam, you've analysed, researched, and are fully prepared to answer any question on every possible scenario the clients have presented. One of the biggest tips we can give you about exam technique is to relate your answers to the clients. This is so important for a level 6 exam and examiners will be looking out for it. Here's an example from a previous exam paper. This question asks you to identify the additional information you'd require to advise Jim and Sandra on the suitability and tax efficiency of their retirement planning arrangements. In the blue bubble is the senior examiner's comments. A number of candidates failed to identify key information that applied specifically to the clients, such as the financial strength of the DB scheme and other issues relating to Jim's pension arrangements. So don't get caught out by this. You do need to be specific in advanced level exams. Always relate your answers to the information given about the clients in the fact find. And as we said before, do not panic about factors questions. In a lot of ways, you are just commenting on what's been told to us in the fact find. Here's an example from a past paper. Explain the factors that should be considered when identifying a suitable level of emergency fund for the clients. You can see the senior examiner's feedback here. The question was about what level of cash they should hold on deposit. So, of course, their spending and the fact they have easy access funds, such as premium bonds, are relevant. Of course, exam nerves come in, but you can try and remember that at all times to relate your answer directly to the clients. Then it should help you to gain as many of the marks here as you can. So in this video, we've looked at the structure of the exam to make sure we all know what to expect, what a revision strategy might look like for the weeks leading up to when the fact finds are released. We've spent time looking at a selection of the typical exam questions you might face. We've thought about what needs to be done once the fact find is released. And finally, we've offered some tips on exam technique. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I really hope you found it useful. As a reminder, you can order our fact find analysis with our email support day by going to our website. You can also access a free taster version of our analysis from a previous sitting to get a feel for it. You might also want to have a look at our How to Pass guide. This is a PDF document which includes lots of useful hints and tips for passing the AF5 exam, and within it you'll find some of the key content from today, and it's downloadable from our website. Good luck with your exam, and do let us know how you get on.